You need to leave this seat right now.
My ticket says 3A. People are waiting because of you.
No. They're waiting because you decided I don't belong here.
Don't make this difficult. You already made the mistake.
Ma'am, you need to step out of the line. Right now. The words cut through the boarding area loud enough to turn heads across gate 23. Conversations stopped. A man folding his newspaper froze mid-motion. A little boy holding a pretzel looked up at his mother. Even the scanner at the boarding desk seemed to fall silent for a second. Vanessa Brooks didn't move immediately. She stood there with her boarding pass still in hand, calm fingers resting against the edge of the paper. Navy pantsuit, low heels, hair pulled into a neat bun. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. But gate agent Linda Harper was staring at her like she had just caught someone stealing. "There's a problem with your ticket," Linda said again, sharper this time. Vanessa slowly lifted her eyes. "Is there?" she asked quietly. Behind her, passengers shifted impatiently. A businessman in a grey cashmere coat sighed dramatically and checked his watch. An older white couple exchanged glances that carried the same silent question spreading through the gate area. "What's she doing in first class?" Vanessa recognized the look instantly. She had seen it in airports from Atlanta to Seattle. Hotels, boardrooms, even federal buildings. The look people gave before they decided you did not belong somewhere. Linda forced a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Please, step aside while I verify your reservation." The scanner light reflected off the polished floor beneath them. Red, cold, mechanical. Vanessa glanced briefly at her boarding pass. "Seat 3A first class. Confirmed." She looked back up. "Everyone else seems to be boarding just fine," she said. A flicker crossed Linda's face. Irritation. Defensive panic. Something uglier underneath. That's because everyone else's information checked out. There it was. Not loud enough to report, not direct enough to deny, but sharp enough to wound. A few people nearby pretended not to listen while listening to every word. A woman with oversized sunglasses leaned closer to her husband. A college-aged guy slowly lowered his headphones. Vanessa stepped aside without arguing. That surprised Linda. Most passengers became emotional when embarrassed, publicly, angry, defensive, loud. Vanessa became quieter, and somehow that was worse. Linda typed aggressively at her keyboard, nails striking plastic with nervous force. She clicked through screens she barely understood, eyes scanning for something, anything, that justified the suspicion already rooted in her mind. Vanessa watched her calmly. Inside, though, every detail was being catalogued. Tone, body language, delay time, passenger reactions, differential treatment. The job had trained her that way. A tall white man stepped forward beside the rope divider, holding a first-class boarding pass. Linda's entire face changed when she looked at him. Warm smile, easy voice, immediate scan. "You're all set, Mr. Patterson. Enjoy the flight." 3 seconds. That was all it took. Meanwhile, Vanessa had been standing there nearly 4 minutes. The older man with the newspaper finally muttered under his breath, "This is getting ridiculous." But he did not mean Linda's behavior. He meant Vanessa holding up the line. Vanessa heard him. So did Linda. And Linda relaxed slightly after that. Validation. Social permission. The crowd was tilting her way now. She looked back at Vanessa. "Can I see your ID again?" Vanessa handed it over silently. Linda studied the license for an uncomfortably long time. Her eyes moved from the photo to Vanessa's face and back again, searching for mismatch, for fraud, for some invisible justification her instincts kept demanding. But the ID was real. The ticket was real. Everything was real. That was the problem. Because Linda Harper had already decided something long before Vanessa reached the counter. People like her did not sit in first class. Vanessa noticed the slight tightening around Linda's mouth when the system confirmed the reservation again. Valid. Paid in full. No flags, no issues. Linda handed the documents back carefully, almost reluctantly. "Well," she said stiffly, "looks like everything checks out after all." After all. Vanessa took the boarding pass. Their fingers brushed briefly. Linda's hand was cold. Vanessa held her gaze 1 second longer than necessary. Not hostile, not emotional. Measured. Controlled. And for the first time that morning, Linda felt something shift deep in her stomach. Not guilt. Fear. Because some instincts arrive too late. And somewhere beneath the calm expression behind Vanessa Brooks's eyes sat a federal badge powerful enough to destroy careers before sunset. Vanessa walked down the jet bridge without looking back. The sound of rolling luggage echoed against the narrow metal walls. Overhead lights buzzed faintly above her, casting long, pale reflections across the floor. The cold, recycled air carried the familiar smell of coffee, perfume, and aircraft fuel. Behind her, boarding continued. Fast. Normal, efficient, as if nothing had happened. That was how moments like these survived for so long. Not through screaming hatred, through routine, through polite humiliation disguised as policy. Vanessa stepped into the aircraft doorway and was greeted by a flight attendant whose smile appeared a second too late. "Welcome aboard," the woman said automatically. Her name tag read, Veronica Hayes. 52. Perfect makeup. Tight blonde curls pinned neatly above the collar of her navy uniform. Her posture carried the stiffness of someone who had spent decades performing emotional labor for strangers 30,000 feet in the air. But Vanessa noticed something else, too. Veronica had already been warned about her. Tiny things gave it away. The hesitation before eye contact. The quick downward glance at the boarding pass. The overly careful smile. Seat 3. Suddenly mattered more than it should. Vanessa continued forward into the first-class cabin. Soft amber lighting glowed against polished wood panels. Leather seats stretched wide and expensive beneath folded blankets and crystal-clear water glasses. Comfort. Privilege. Access. And for some people, protected territory. A man in a charcoal suit looked up from his laptop as Vanessa approached. Mid-50s, silver watch, wedding ring. He blinked once when he realized she was taking the seat beside him. Not outrage. Calculation. He quickly masked it with a polite nod. "Morning." "Morning," Vanessa replied calmly. She placed her carry-on into the overhead compartment with smooth, practiced movements. Nothing rushed. Nothing uncertain. Then she sat down, and the entire row subtly changed around her. The businessman shifted slightly farther toward the window. Across the aisle, an older woman lowered her magazine halfway, pretending to read while openly staring. Her husband leaned closer and whispered something near her ear. Vanessa did not need to hear it. She had heard versions her entire life. Maybe she's an athlete. Maybe entertainment. Maybe somebody upgraded her by mistake. Rarely the truth. Vanessa buckled her seatbelt and glanced toward the front galley. Veronica was standing there, talking quietly with another crew member. Then the gate door reopened. Linda Harper stepped onto the aircraft. That was unusual. Gate agents rarely boarded after scanning passengers unless something was wrong. Vanessa watched Linda's eyes sweep across first class until they landed directly on seat 3A. There it was again. That same look. Not confusion anymore. Determination. Linda leaned close to Veronica and whispered rapidly. Veronica's expression changed instantly. Her shoulders stiffened. Her lips parted slightly. Then both women looked at Vanessa together. The businessman beside her noticed it too. He slowly removed his glasses. "Everything okay?" he asked carefully. Vanessa kept her eyes forward. "We're about to find out." Linda started walking down the aisle, fast heels against carpet. Sharp, purposeful. The cabin quieted almost instinctively as passengers sensed conflict approaching. Human beings always sensed tension before words arrived. Veronica followed 2 steps behind, clutching a tablet tightly against her chest like a shield. Linda stopped directly beside Vanessa's seat. Her smile was gone now. Completely gone. "Miss Brooks," she said loudly enough for nearby rows to hear, "there appears to be an issue with your seating assignment." The businessman beside Vanessa frowned immediately. She already boarded. Linda ignored him. Vanessa slowly turned her head upward. What kind of issue? Linda folded her hands together tightly. This seat was reserved for another passenger. A pause. Heavy. Dangerous. Vanessa's expression never changed, but inside, every instinct sharpened instantly. Because this was no longer suspicion. This was action. And actions left evidence. "I purchased this seat 3 weeks ago," Vanessa said calmly. The system confirmed it twice. Veronica shifted nervously beside Linda. Her fingers tightened around the tablet. Linda inhaled slowly through her nose. "There's been an adjustment. We'll need you to relocate to economy." The words landed like ice water across the cabin. Across the aisle, the older woman's eyes widened. The businessman beside Vanessa stared openly now. "Wait," he said slowly. "You're removing her after boarding?" Linda's jaw tightened. Vanessa looked directly into her eyes. And for the first time that morning, Linda Harper realized this woman was not embarrassed. She was observing. The silence around seat 3 thickened instantly. Not loud, not explosive. Worse. Controlled embarrassment always carried a different kind of cruelty. It forced the victim to either comply quietly or become the problem everyone remembered. Vanessa remained seated, her posture straight, hands folded calmly in her lap, eyes locked on Linda Harper with a levelness that made the older woman visibly uncomfortable. Behind Linda, Veronica shifted her weight again, glancing toward the boarding door as more passengers entered the cabin. People were slowing down now, pretending to organize bags while openly watching. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. The businessman beside Vanessa finally spoke again. "What exactly is the issue here?" he asked. Linda forced another brittle smile. There was a seating discrepancy. That doesn't answer the question. Linda ignored him completely. That told Vanessa everything she needed to know. People like Linda only ignored certain passengers when they believed institutional authority protected them. It was never random. It was learned behavior, reinforced behavior. Vanessa uncrossed her legs slowly. Who is the passenger assigned to this seat? Linda hesitated. A fraction too long. Then a tall white man in an expensive navy coat stepped into the aisle near row 2. Mid-40s. Broad shoulders, Rolex watch catching cabin light. Phone still pressed to his ear. He looked directly at seat 3A, and irritation flashed across his face immediately. "There's my seat," he muttered impatiently. Not confusion. Possession. Vanessa studied him carefully. The man barely acknowledged her existence. To him, she was not another customer. She was an obstacle delaying his comfort. Linda straightened slightly the moment he appeared. Her tone softened instantly. "We're resolving it now, Mr. Whitmore." There it was again. Two different voices, two different levels of respect, two different Americas existing 5 feet apart. Mr. Whitmore glanced at Vanessa briefly, then back at Linda. "I paid extra for that seat this morning." Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "And I paid for it 3 weeks ago." The man frowned as if hearing her speak had complicated something simple. "Well," he said slowly, "somebody made a mistake. Not we. Not the airline. Somebody. Meaning her." Linda seized the opening immediately. "Exactly. That's why we need to reseat Miss Brooks." Veronica looked increasingly uneasy now. Her fingers tightened harder around the tablet tucked against her chest. Vanessa noticed the tiny tremor in her hand. Fear. Not guilt yet. Fear came first. "Can you show me documentation confirming this reassignment?" Vanessa asked calmly. Linda blinked once. "Excuse me." "The seating override," Vanessa continued. "Or the operational adjustment authorization. If you're removing a confirmed passenger after boarding, there should be documentation." The businessman beside Vanessa looked at her differently after that. Sharper, more attentive. Because ordinary passengers did not talk like that. Linda's face hardened immediately. "We are not required to disclose internal procedures. You are if those procedures violate federal passenger protections." A flicker. Tiny. Fast. But Veronica saw it too. Linda's confidence cracked for half a second before anger rushed in to cover it. "Ma'am," Linda said sharply, "you can either cooperate voluntarily or delay this entire flight." There it was. Public pressure. Turn the crowd against her. Make compliance seem virtuous. Make resistance seem selfish. Across the aisle, the older woman sighed loudly enough to be heard. "Oh, for heaven's sake." Her husband leaned closer. "Just move her and let's go." Vanessa heard every word. So did Linda. And Linda relaxed slightly again. The cabin was becoming useful. Social discomfort was often more effective than policy. Mr. Whitmore checked his watch dramatically. "I have a meeting in Los Angeles." Vanessa looked up at him calmly. "So do I." Something about her tone unsettled him. Not attitude, certainty. The businessman beside her finally closed his laptop. "I travel every week," he said slowly. "I've never seen someone removed from first class after boarding without compensation." Linda's jaw tightened harder. "Sir, This does not concern you. His eyes narrowed. It concerns every passenger watching this happen. A ripple moved quietly through the cabin. Agreement, discomfort, awareness. Linda felt it immediately. The situation was slipping. Fast. So she made this mistake powerful people often made when challenged publicly. She pushed harder. "Miss Brooks," she said coldly, "if you refuse to move, airport security can escort you off this aircraft." The cabin went completely silent. Even Veronica looked shocked by that. Vanessa slowly stood up. Not intimidated. Not emotional. And somehow, that frightened Linda more than anger would have, because the moment Vanessa Brooks rose from seat 3A, she stopped looking like a passenger being removed. She started looking like someone collecting evidence. Vanessa stood slowly enough to make everyone watch. The cabin lights reflected softly against the dark blue fabric of her suit as she reached into the overhead compartment and pulled down her carry-on with controlled, deliberate movements. No shaking hands, no visible anger. That unsettled people more than yelling ever could. Linda stepped back slightly to let her into the aisle, but her face carried the rigid satisfaction of someone who believed authority had won. Mr. Whitmore loosened his coat and moved toward seat 3A before Vanessa had even fully stepped away from it. Possession again. Immediate. Instinctive. The businessman beside the window watched the exchange carefully. His expression had changed now. Less passive, more troubled. "This doesn't feel right," he muttered quietly. No one answered him, because deep down, everyone already knew it wasn't right. The older woman across the aisle suddenly spoke up. If there was really a seating error, why wasn't it fixed before boarding? Linda turned sharply. "Ma'am, we're handling the situation." The woman pressed her lips together, but kept staring. People were beginning to notice details now. The timing, the tone, the imbalance. That was dangerous. Linda understood something most corporations understood instinctively. Bias survived best when nobody slowed down long enough to examine it. "Miss Brooks," she said briskly, "your new seat assignment is in economy. Row 25. Vanessa glanced at the paper Linda handed her. Middle seat. Of course. Not premium economy. Not another first-class seat. A middle seat. A quiet punishment disguised as logistics. Vanessa lifted her eyes slowly. So the airline oversold first class, removed a confirmed passenger after boarding, and offered no compensation? Linda's jaw flexed. "We've already explained the situation." "No," Vanessa replied calmly. "You explained a decision, not the situation." That landed harder than Linda expected. Even Veronica lowered her eyes for a second. Mr. Whitmore slid into seat 3A with visible relief, immediately plugging in his phone charger like the conflict had never existed. The symbolism of it almost made the entire cabin feel colder. A black woman removed, a wealthy white man settling comfortably into her place. Too clean, too familiar. Vanessa turned toward the back of the aircraft, carrying her bag herself. No crew member offered assistance. Not Veronica, not Linda. Nothing. The businessman near the window suddenly stood halfway. "Excuse me," he called toward Linda. "What's your name?" Linda froze briefly. "Why?" "Because I'm considering filing a complaint." The words hit the cabin like a dropped glass. Linda's cheeks flushed instantly. "Sir, there's no need for that." "I think there is," Vanessa paused briefly in the aisle, but did not turn around. Interesting. Witnesses mattered. Not because one complaint changed systems, because multiple witnesses made denial harder. As she moved deeper into the aircraft, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. First class disappeared behind her, like a private club closing its doors. The aisle narrowed. The lighting dimmed. Legroom shrank. America compressed itself row by row. Passengers in economy barely glanced up as she approached. A tired mother bounced a crying toddler against her shoulder. A teenager slept with his head against the window. An older black woman folded her hands tightly over a worn purse while waiting for a flight attendant who still had not returned with the blanket she requested 10 minutes earlier. Vanessa noticed everything. Always. She reached row 25, middle seat. A young man wearing headphones barely moved his knees to let her in. On the aisle sat a heavy-set woman scrolling aggressively through Facebook without looking up once. Vanessa settled into the cramped seat slowly. The overhead bin nearby was already full. Of course it was. A flight attendant passing by sighed impatiently when Vanessa asked where to place her carry-on. "You'll have to put it farther back." No offer to help. Vanessa carried the bag herself 3 rows down before finally finding space. By the time she returned to her seat, boarding was nearly complete. The aircraft doors closed with a heavy mechanical thud, and suddenly the reality of what had happened settled over her completely. Not because she lost the seat, because of how easily everyone accepted it. The engines outside began to roar softly as the aircraft pushed away from the gate. Vanessa stared forward quietly, while cabin lights dimmed slightly for departure. Then, without attracting attention, she slipped her phone from her purse and opened a secure encrypted note file. Time, gate, flight number, seat reassignment, names involved, witness descriptions, language used, every detail entered with surgical precision. A few rows ahead, the older black woman finally pressed her call button again for the blanket no one had brought. No response. Vanessa looked up slowly at the glowing button above her, and deep behind her calm expression, something hardened. Because this was no longer one incident. This was a pattern. 40 minutes after takeoff, the resentment inside the cabin had settled into something quieter. Not peace. Resignation. The seatbelt sign had turned off. Overhead vents hummed softly. Movie screens glowed blue across tired faces, while flight attendants moved down the aisle, pushing metal service carts that rattled against armrests every few seconds. Vanessa sat motionless in seat 25E, watching. The older black woman across the aisle still had no blanket. 3 requests now. Vanessa counted each one. The first had been ignored completely. The second earned a rushed, "I'll be right back." The third received a tight smile from a young flight attendant who immediately walked past her to refill wine for a white couple 2 rows ahead. Patterns. Always patterns. The older woman finally folded her arms tightly against herself and stared out the window in silence. That silence carried humiliation inside it. Vanessa recognized it instantly. People stopped asking when dignity became too expensive. The heavy-set woman beside Vanessa suddenly muttered under her breath while scrolling her phone. Unbelievable. Vanessa glanced sideways. The woman shook her head toward the aisle. That lady's been asking forever. Simple observation. No politics, just human decency noticing imbalance. Vanessa gave a small nod. Yes. At the front of economy, another call light blinked on. No response. A man in work boots leaned into the aisle trying to get someone's attention. "Excuse me," he called. "Can we get some water over here?" Still nothing. But 30 seconds later, 2 flight attendants appeared instantly near the premium economy divider, carrying fresh drinks to a group of sharply dressed businessmen, laughing loudly over bourbon glasses. Vanessa watched the timing carefully. Who waited? Who didn't? Who mattered first? Then her phone vibrated once inside her purse. A secure message. Ethan. She opened it discreetly beneath the tray table. Seeing the same thing back here. 3 ignored service calls in my section. Only fast responses near premium rows. 1 passenger already complaining. Vanessa typed carefully. Document everything. No interference yet. She locked the phone again. Across the aisle, the older woman finally pressed the call button a 4th time. This time Veronica appeared. Her smile looked exhausted now, forced, cracking around the edges. "Yes, ma'am?" The older woman spoke softly. Too softly. "I asked for a blanket a while ago." Veronica blinked, as though genuinely surprised. "Oh. Right." But Vanessa saw it immediately. Recognition. Veronica remembered. She just prioritized someone else. "I'll bring one," Veronica said quickly. Then she turned and walked away again. 10 minutes passed. No blanket. The older woman stopped pressing the button after that. Vanessa slowly exhaled through her nose. The cruelty was rarely dramatic. That was what made it survive. Not slurs. Not violence. Delay. Dismissal. Erosion. A child suddenly began crying somewhere near row 31. Sharp, desperate sobs echoed through the cabin, while his mother struggled to open a bottle with one hand and hold the toddler with the other. Nobody came. Meanwhile, laughter drifted from first class beyond the curtain. 2 separate realities flying across the same sky. Vanessa's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Then movement near the front caught her attention. A tall man in a white pilot shirt was walking down the aisle toward economy. Not rushing. Scanning. Captain Michael Turner. Late 50s. Broad shoulders. Grey at the temples. The kind of face carved by decades of responsibility and exhaustion. Passengers noticed immediately. Pilots did not walk into economy mid-flight unless something was wrong. The captain's eyes moved row by row until they landed directly on Vanessa. And held. Interesting. He approached slowly, while Veronica followed several feet behind him, looking visibly tense. Passengers nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Captain Turner offered a polite nod. "Miss Brooks." Vanessa looked up calmly. "Yes?" "I was wondering if we could speak privately for a moment." The aisle seemed to tighten around those words. The heavy-set woman beside Vanessa lowered her phone completely now. The older black woman across the aisle stared openly. Even the young man with headphones pulled one ear free. Because suddenly, everyone understood something important. The airline was coming back. Vanessa rose slowly from the middle seat. Captain Turner stepped aside to let her into the aisle. And as she followed him toward the front of the aircraft, Veronica avoided eye contact entirely. That told Vanessa more than any apology could. Someone upstairs had finally realized a line had been crossed. The only question now was whether they understood how far. Captain Turner stopped near the curtain, dividing economy from first class. The low engine hum vibrated faintly beneath the floor, while passengers nearby pretended not to stare. Veronica stood behind him, with her hands clasped tightly in front of her uniform, shoulders tense enough to reveal panic even before she spoke. Turner lowered his voice. "Miss Brooks, I understand there was an issue regarding your seat assignment earlier." Vanessa watched him carefully. Not just the words, the delivery. Pilots learned how to manage conflict the same way corporations did. Calm tone, controlled posture, language designed to reduce liability before responsibility. "Yes," Vanessa said evenly. "There was." The captain nodded once. "I've reviewed part of the boarding report, and I'm trying to understand how this situation was handled." Interesting phrasing. Not whether it happened. How it happened. Vanessa noticed Veronica swallow hard beside him. The captain continued. "Normally, if first class is oversold, compensation procedures are initiated before boarding. We don't usually remove seated passengers unless there's a security concern." Security concern. Another loaded phrase. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. Was there one? A pause. Tiny. Important. Turner glanced briefly toward Veronica before answering. "Not that I can determine." There it was. Veronica closed her eyes for half a second, like someone hearing a crack spread through ice beneath their feet. Vanessa stayed silent. Silence forced people to keep talking, and nervous people usually revealed more than they intended. Turner exhaled slowly. "Miss Brooks, I want to apologize for the inconvenience." Inconvenience. The word landed softly. Too softly. Not humiliation. Not discrimination. Not public removal. Inconvenience. Vanessa looked directly into his eyes. "Do you often inconvenience passengers by threatening them with airport security after they've shown valid tickets?" That hit harder. Turner's expression tightened immediately. Because now the conversation had crossed from customer service into legal territory. Veronica finally spoke, voice strained. "Captain, I was following instructions from the gate." Vanessa turned toward her slowly. Veronica looked exhausted now. Mascara faintly smudged near the corners of her eyes. The polished professionalism from earlier was collapsing under pressure. "She told us the reservation was suspicious," Veronica said quickly, "that there might be fraud involved." Fraud. There it was. The word sitting beneath every glance since JFK Vanessa watched her carefully. And what exactly made my reservation suspicious? Veronica froze. No answer. Because there had never been evidence. Only assumption. Captain Turner noticed it too. His eyes shifted sharply toward Veronica now. Was there an actual system flag? Veronica hesitated again. "Too long. I don't know," she admitted quietly. Linda said there was. The captain's jaw hardened. Outside the small galley window, clouds drifted endlessly through pale afternoon light, while the aircraft cut forward through the sky with mechanical certainty. Inside the cabin, certainty was disappearing fast. Turner rubbed one hand across his mouth slowly, thinking. Then he made a decision. "We have another open first-class seat," he said finally. 5C. "I'd like to move you there immediately." Veronica looked relieved so quickly it was almost painful to watch. Damage control. Too late for prevention. Right on time for liability management. Vanessa studied the captain carefully. Why now? Turner met her eyes directly for the first time. Because what happened should not have happened. Closer. Not enough, but closer. Vanessa folded her arms calmly. Did someone complain? Another pause. Again. Too long. Yes, he admitted. A passenger in first class raised concerns after you were moved. Interesting. Not morality. Pressure. Systems rarely corrected themselves until witnesses became inconvenient. Vanessa nodded slowly as if processing the information. Inside, her mind was moving rapidly now, fitting behaviors together like pieces of evidence on a courtroom wall. The businessman, the complaints, the shifting tone, the sudden intervention. Fear was spreading upward through the chain. Good. Captain Turner straightened slightly. Miss Brooks, we'd like to make this right. Vanessa almost smiled at that. No, she thought. You want this quiet. But she simply said, all right. Relief flashed across Veronica's face instantly. Too fast. The captain gestured toward first class. We'll move your luggage. That won't be necessary, Vanessa replied. And before either of them could respond, she reached for her own carry-on again. Just like before. No one offered to help her now either. That detail mattered too. As Vanessa followed them back toward first class, passengers in economy watched openly. The older black woman who never received her blanket gave Vanessa a long look filled with something deeper than curiosity. Recognition, because some people understood injustice immediately, not from theory, from experience. And as Vanessa stepped once more beyond the curtain separating first class from the rest of the aircraft, she realized something cold and undeniable. The airline had not corrected the problem. It had only realized the wrong person had been targeted. Seat 5C felt quieter than 3A. Not more comfortable, not more luxurious, just quieter. The first-class cabin had changed since Vanessa returned. Conversations were softer now. Eyes lingered longer. People who had ignored her earlier suddenly became fascinated by their drinks, their phones, the clouds outside the windows. Nobody wanted to become part of the story anymore. Vanessa settled into the seat slowly, while Veronica placed a folded blanket beside her with forced professionalism. "Can I get you something to drink?" Veronica asked carefully. The tone was completely different now. Gentler, measured, afraid. Vanessa looked up at her. "Water's fine." Veronica nodded too quickly and disappeared into the galley. Across the aisle, Mr. Whitmore avoided eye contact entirely. His earlier confidence had faded into irritation mixed with embarrassment. He kept typing aggressively on his laptop, jaw tight, pretending the world around him no longer existed. The businessman from earlier sat 2 rows ahead now. He glanced back briefly toward Vanessa and gave the smallest nod. Witnesses recognized each other differently after conflict. The aircraft hummed steadily through open blue sky, while flight attendants resumed service with exaggerated politeness. Glasses clinked softly. Ice shifted in silver buckets. Smiles returned. Artificial normalcy. That was the corporate instinct. Restore appearance first. Truth later. Maybe never. Vanessa accepted the water when Veronica returned. "Thank you," she said calmly. The simple politeness unsettled Veronica even more, because cruelty became harder to justify when the target refused to become hostile. Veronica lingered awkwardly beside the seat. "Miss Brooks, about earlier." Vanessa lifted her eyes slowly. Veronica stopped speaking immediately. Fear again. Not fear of Vanessa herself. Fear of consequences she still could not fully see. Before either woman could continue, a sharp, choking sound suddenly cut through the cabin, loud, violent. Every head turned instantly. 3 rows ahead, a woman clutched desperately at her throat while collapsing sideways into the aisle. Her husband lunged toward her in panic. "Oh my God! Claire! Claire!" The woman's face was turning red fast. Her breathing came in short, terrifying gasps. A glass shattered against the floor. Passengers recoiled instantly. Some stood halfway before freezing. Others pulled back into their seats as fear spread through the cabin like electricity. "Help her!" the husband shouted wildly. "She can't breathe!" Veronica snapped into motion, rushing forward with another flight attendant close behind. "Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman could barely respond. Her throat was swelling visibly now. An allergic reaction. Severe. The husband's hands shook violently. "I told them no nuts!" he yelled. "I told them twice!" Nobody answered him, because somewhere in the panic, somebody already knew he was telling the truth. Passengers began talking all at once now. What happened? "She needs oxygen." "Call the pilot." "Is there a doctor?" Fear changed cabin dynamics instantly. Money disappeared. Status disappeared. Everybody became fragile at 30,000 feet. Veronica looked overwhelmed. Truly overwhelmed. "Get the medical kit," she snapped toward another attendant. "It's locked. Then get the captain authorization." The husband dropped to his knees beside his wife. "Claire, stay with me. Baby, look at me." His voice cracked apart on the last words. Vanessa was already moving before most people realized it. She knelt beside the woman calmly, controlled even inside the chaos. How long ago did symptoms start? The husband looked up frantically. "A few minutes. Maybe less. Does she carry an EpiPen?" "Yes." "Purse." His hands trembled too badly to unzip it properly. Vanessa took the bag gently from him and searched fast. Receipts, wallet, medication. Then there, blue injector pen. "She needs this now," Vanessa said firmly. Veronica stared at her. Frozen. Training had failed. Procedure had failed. Panic had taken over. Vanessa's voice sharpened instantly. "Veronica. Focus." Something about the command cut through the fear. Veronica blinked hard. "Right." Passengers watched in stunned silence as Vanessa guided the husband through the injection, while another attendant finally returned with oxygen. Claire gasped sharply moments later. Air. Tiny. Painful. But air. The entire cabin exhaled together, and standing near the galley entrance, Captain Turner stared at Vanessa Brooks with an expression that had nothing to do with customer service anymore. Because suddenly the woman they removed from first class no longer looked like a passenger at all. She looked like someone accustomed to taking control when systems failed. Claire's breathing slowly stabilized beneath the oxygen mask. Not fully, not safely, but enough to pull the cabin back from panic. The husband stayed crouched beside her seat, gripping her hand with both of his, eyes red, chest still rising too fast. Every few seconds he looked at Vanessa, the way drowning people looked at solid ground. Passengers whispered all around them now. Not annoyed whispers anymore, uneasy ones. Because people had just watched a stranger respond faster than the airline staff, trained for exactly this situation. Captain Turner stepped forward immediately. "Is she stable?" Vanessa looked up calmly. For now, she still needs medical evaluation when we land. Turner nodded sharply toward Veronica. Notify ground medical services. Veronica moved fast this time. Too fast. Fear had changed her priorities completely. As she disappeared toward the galley, Claire's husband looked up again. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. Nobody was listening to us. Those words landed harder than he realized. Nobody was listening. Not until crisis made ignoring impossible. Vanessa rose slowly from the floor beside Claire's seat. Her knees cracked softly after kneeling against the carpet. Captain Turner instinctively stepped aside to give her space. Interesting. Authority recognized authority even before understanding it. The businessman from earlier stood halfway from his seat now. "Captain," he said carefully, "that woman saved your passenger." Turner's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm aware. No defensiveness, no corporate polish, just pressure building behind his eyes." Mr. Whitmore finally looked up from his laptop again. His face had lost color. The earlier arrogance was gone now, replaced by something far more uncomfortable. Self-awareness. Because suddenly the woman removed from first class had become the most competent person on the aircraft. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Vanessa returned quietly toward seat 5C, while the cabin watched her move through the aisle. Not dramatically, not proudly. Controlled. That control unsettled people now more than ever. Veronica returned, carrying paperwork with trembling fingers. She stopped beside Vanessa's seat awkwardly. "Miss Brooks?" Vanessa looked up. Veronica glanced around first to make sure nobody stood close enough to hear clearly. Then her voice dropped lower. "What happened earlier?" She swallowed hard. It wasn't supposed to go that far. Vanessa stayed silent. Veronica rushed to fill the silence immediately. "Linda told us your ticket had been flagged." "Flagged for what?" Another hesitation. "Possible fraud," Veronica admitted quietly. Vanessa's expression did not change, but Veronica felt the temperature shift anyway. She said the reservation looked suspicious. Veronica continued nervously. "She told us to be careful." "Suspicious how?" Veronica opened her mouth, closed it again. Because now she heard the insanity of it herself. Vanessa leaned back slowly in the leather seat, eyes steady on Veronica's face. "Did anyone verify the claim before removing me from my seat?" Silence. The answer sat between them immediately. "No. Of course not." Captain Turner overheard enough from nearby to stop moving completely. His eyes shifted slowly toward Veronica now. "What exactly was suspicious about her reservation?" he asked. Veronica looked trapped, cornered between truth and survival. Veronica's voice weakened. "Linda said people like her sometimes use stolen reward accounts." The words escaped before she could stop them. The cabin air seemed to vanish instantly. Even Mr. Whitmore looked stunned. Captain Turner stared at Veronica in complete silence, because now the truth finally stood naked in the aisle. Not policy, not overbooking, not confusion, bias, ugly, routine, systemic. Veronica realized what she had done the moment the words landed. Her face drained white immediately. "That's not what I meant." But everybody knew exactly what she meant. Vanessa watched her quietly. No triumph, no anger. That somehow made it worse. Captain Turner rubbed one hand slowly across his face, like a man watching years of professional trust collapse in real time. "How long," he asked quietly, "has this been happening?" Veronica's eyes filled instantly. Not from morality. From fear. "I don't know," she whispered. "A while." There it was. Not one mistake. A culture. The businessman near the window slowly closed his laptop. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath. Claire's husband overheard enough from 2 rows ahead to look back sharply. His face hardened instantly. "You almost ignored my wife too," he said. Nobody answered him, because nobody could. Outside the aircraft windows, endless clouds rolled beneath the fading afternoon sun while the plane pushed west toward Los Angeles. Inside the cabin, something much larger than one flight had finally begun surfacing. And Vanessa Brooks sat quietly in the seat 5C, watching an entire system slowly realize it had exposed itself in front of the wrong witness. The cabin never fully recovered after that. People spoke quieter now. Even the sound of silverware against ceramic plates seemed restrained, careful, like the entire aircraft understood something irreversible had surfaced between the clouds. Veronica disappeared into the galley and stayed there longer than necessary. Captain Turner remained near the front of first class with his arms folded tightly across his chest, staring occasionally toward the cockpit without actually seeing it. His mind was somewhere else now. Replaying. The gate report. The seating override. The threat of security. The reaction from his own crew. Years in aviation had taught him one brutal truth. Small decisions destroyed companies faster than major disasters ever did. Because disasters created sympathy. Patterns created lawsuits. Vanessa sat quietly beside the window, watching sunset bleed slowly across the horizon in long streaks of gold and deep orange. Her expression remained unreadable, but inside her thoughts moved with cold precision. Timeline established. Witnesses confirmed. Direct language documented. Medical negligence observed. Admission obtained. Enough for escalation. Maybe enough for federal review. Her phone vibrated once again beneath the tray table. Ethan. Need status update. Crew behavior worsening in economy. Passenger claims similar treatment happened before. Vanessa typed carefully. Continue observations. Do not reveal identity yet. She locked the screen and slipped the phone away, just as Captain Turner approached again. This time, he looked older. Not physically. Morally. The weight of leadership had settled visibly into the lines around his eyes. "Miss Brooks," he said quietly. "May I sit for a moment?" Vanessa gestured calmly toward the empty seat beside her. Turner lowered himself slowly into it, elbows resting briefly against his knees, before he leaned back with a long, controlled breath. Outside the window, sunlight flickered across his face like passing judgment. "I owe you more than an apology," he admitted finally. Vanessa said nothing. The silence forced honesty again. Turner rubbed his jaw tiredly. "I've been flying for 32 years. I've seen difficult passengers, fake complaints, drunk executives, entitled celebrities." He paused. "But this..." He looked toward the galley where Veronica remained hidden. "This feels different, because it was. Not one employee, not one mistake. An ecosystem." Vanessa turned toward him slightly. "What exactly feels different, Captain?" Turner stared ahead at the dim cabin lights glowing above first class. The confidence, he admitted quietly. Nobody acted surprised until witnesses pushed back. That answer mattered. Because now he understood the core issue. Bias survived through repetition, through normalization, through the assumption that nobody important would ever challenge it. The businessman from earlier overheard enough while pretending to read financial reports nearby. He slowly lowered the papers. "She's right," he said quietly. "I travel constantly. You start noticing patterns after a while." Turner looked toward him. The man hesitated briefly before continuing. Older passengers ignored. Black passengers questioned more aggressively. Economy complaints delayed. He exhaled slowly. Most people just don't say anything, because it's easier not to. There it was again. Silence. The fuel systems of injustice were rarely hatred, usually comfort. Captain Turner leaned back heavily against the seat. God. The word barely escaped him. Vanessa watched his reaction carefully. Not because she needed emotional validation. Because accountability only began once denial collapsed. Suddenly the intercom chimed softly overhead. A flight attendant's voice followed moments later. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Los Angeles. Please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened." Movement spread across the cabin immediately. Window shades lifted. Laptops closed. Passengers straightened in their seats. But the emotional atmosphere remained tense. Unfinished. Veronica finally emerged from the galley, carrying a stack of landing paperwork, with visibly shaking hands. Her eyes met Vanessa's for half a second, before immediately dropping away. Shame now, not fear. That came later in the cycle. Captain Turner stood slowly. Before leaving, he looked down at Vanessa carefully. "I don't think this ends when we land," he said quietly. Vanessa held his gaze. "No," she replied calmly. "It doesn't." Something in her tone made him stop completely. Not threat. Certainty. The businessman near the window frowned slightly as realization slowly moved across his face. "Who exactly are you?" Vanessa turned back toward the sunset outside without answering the unspoken question. Because beneath the calm posture, beneath the navy suit and measured voice, a federal credential rested silently inside her bag. And in less than 1 hour, everyone on this aircraft was going to understand exactly who they had tried to remove from first class. The wheels hit the runway with a violent screech that shook the entire cabin. Los Angeles spread outside the windows in endless gold lights beneath the darkening sky, while the aircraft roared down the runway, engines reversing hard enough to push passengers forward against their seatbelts. Nobody clapped. Nobody spoke. The silence felt heavier now, anticipation replacing discomfort. Every person on board understood the flight had become something far larger than delayed service or a seating dispute. Captain Turner's voice came over the intercom one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles." His tone sounded different now. Measured. Tired. Careful. The aircraft taxied slowly toward the gate, while phones immediately lit up across the cabin. Messages, emails, updates waiting on the ground. But several passengers kept looking toward Vanessa instead. The businessman near the window never reopened his laptop. Mr. Whitmore stared straight ahead without moving. Even Claire's husband kept glancing back from 3 rows ahead, with visible gratitude still written across his exhausted face. The plane finally stopped. Seatbelt signs remained illuminated. No one stood. Then the front cabin door opened. Cold evening air rushed softly into the aircraft, and 3 people stepped inside. Not paramedics this time. Not gate staff. 2 men in dark federal jackets, 1 woman carrying a leather portfolio. Professional, focused, direct. Captain Turner's face tightened immediately the moment he saw them. Veronica went pale. One of the agents spoke quietly near the cockpit entrance before scanning the cabin once. Then his eyes landed directly on Vanessa Brooks, and he nodded. Not greeting. Recognition. Passengers noticed instantly. Vanessa stood slowly from seat 5C and reached calmly into her leather bag. Veronica's breathing visibly quickened. Captain Turner stepped aside automatically without even realizing he was doing it. Vanessa removed a slim black credential case and opened it with one smooth motion. Gold seal. Federal identification. Department of Transportation. The cabin froze. Every remaining whisper disappeared instantly. Vanessa Brooks looked completely different now, even though nothing about her appearance had changed. Same navy suit, same calm posture, same measured breathing. But power altered perception faster than truth ever could. The businessman near the window stared openly. Oh my God. Mr. Whitmore's face drained of color completely. Claire's husband let out a stunned breath under his breath. Jesus. Vanessa looked toward the federal team calmly. I'll need formal statements collected from several passengers and crew members before deboarding begins. No hesitation, no uncertainty. One of the agents nodded immediately. Already arranged. Veronica grabbed the edge of a seat for balance. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. You were investigating us? Vanessa turned toward her slowly. No, she said calmly. I was observing. That hit harder. Because investigations sounded targeted. Observation meant this behavior happened naturally, comfortably, repeatedly. Captain Turner lowered his eyes briefly. Shame moved visibly across his face now, deep and unmistakable. How far does this go? He asked quietly. Vanessa studied him for a long moment before answering. That depends on how long people knew. The words settled into the cabin like concrete. Nobody moved, because suddenly every ignored complaint mattered. Every delayed response mattered. Every silence mattered. The older black woman from economy appeared briefly near the front during deboarding assistance. She saw Vanessa standing beside federal agents and stopped cold. Their eyes met. Recognition passed silently between them. Not surprise. Validation. For the first time that day, someone had finally believed what people like her experienced all the time. Outside the aircraft windows, flashing airport lights reflected against the dark glass, while federal personnel began entering the cabin row by row. The system was moving now, quietly, legally, precisely, and no corporate apology in the world could stop what came next. Vanessa closed her credential case slowly and looked once more across the first-class cabin where powerful people had spent hours deciding who belonged and who did not. Tonight, the wrong woman had been underestimated, and by morning, careers would begin collapsing because of it. If this story moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment these 3 words: Equal rights matter.